Ohio State football dominates Michigan State. The Ohio State football team came into today's game against Michigan State very confident. This was despite the fact that it was supposed to be a close game. It turns out that the Buckeyes shouldn't have been that concerned. Ryan Day had his team prepared for this one. Ohio State had a 49-0 lead at half. Ohio State ended up winning the game 56-7. C.J. Stroud had 6 touchdowns in the first half, tying the school record for touchdown passes in a game. He had that in the first half against a top 10 opponent. That's simply ridiculous. Stroud very well could have had his Heisman moment today. He only threw 3 incompletions and had 432 yards. He was sensational the entire time he was out there and could have put up more numbers had Day not pulled gum after one series on the second half. Chris Olave had himself a game too. He caught 2 first-half touchdowns and broke the record for career touchdown receptions that was formerly held by David Boston. The Buckeyes showed that any given receiver can beat any defense on any given day. They just have too many weapons. The Ohio State football team's defense was also really good in this game. They didn't allow a score until late in the game when all of the starters were pulled. They played a really strong game, especially against Kenneth Walker. He had no room to run the entire game. He only had 6 carries for a paltry 25 yards. This was one of the more dominant Ohio State games I've seen in a while. They never were threatened by the Spartans. I did not expect this at all. It's a really good sign for this team going into Teton Week. They look like a team on a mission. Michigan State finds out Ohio State is still Ohio State. College football winners and losers, it was a good week to celebrate Michigan State's feel-good season. The Spartans were 9-1, in the thick of the playoff hunt, trying to lock up Coach Mel Tucker to a 10-year, $95 million deal, and heading to Ohio State for a game with major Big Ten title implications. Well, maybe that last part wasn't warm and fuzzy after all. As much as Michigan State's had going for it, this year was still a reemergence after going 16-17 over the last 3 seasons. And Ohio State is Ohio State, a perennial national title contender and owner of just 4 Big Ten losses in the past 10 seasons. Saturday made it clear Ohio State is still Ohio State as the Buckeyes delivered a 56-7 woodshedding that was seemingly over in an instant. Chris Olave's 23-yard touchdown catch from C.J. Stroud to cap the first drive of the game. Garrett Wilson's 77-yard score less than 3 minutes later. Ollie's return trip to the end zone on a 43-yard strike 4 plays after Michigan State missed a field goal. Good morning, good afternoon, good night. Then the Buckeyes had another 3 scores in 3 possession sequence and tacked on another touchdown for good measure. All with 97 seconds before halftime to spare. With a 49-0 lead, the second half was all about avoiding injuries and running out the clock. Stroud, 32 of 35, 432 yards, 6 touchdowns, was just about flawless. He spread the wealth to Olave, 7 catches, 140 yards, 2 scores. Wilson, 7 catches, 126 yards, 2 touchdowns, and Jackson Smith-Njigba, 10 receptions, 105 yards, 1 TD, and the No. 4 Buckeyes, 10-1, 8-0 Big Ten, rolled up 655 total yards for the afternoon. Yes, No. 7 Michigan State, 9-2, 6-2, saw its playoff hopes end, and running back Kenneth Walker 6 carries, 25 yards, couldn't get enough use to make an impression in a spotlight game. The lasting impression, though, was all about the Buckeyes. Ohio State lost to Oregon in its second game and needed some time to finish off Penn State and Nebraska in 9-point victories. But for the most part, the Buckeyes have obliterated opponents since their lone stumble. Saturday marked Ohio State's 6th 50-point game in its past 8 outings. It doesn't move the needle as much when it happens at the expense of Rutgers or Maryland or even Purdue. But steamrolling Michigan State is different. It indicates the Buckeyes are plenty ready for a closing stretch that will take them to Michigan next week, potentially the Big Ten title game to open December, and almost certainly a playoff berth if they get to 12-1, which is nothing new. The setup for Michigan State was all well and good, but Ohio State is the one Big Ten team that usually finds itself feeling good this deep into November. Clemson. In the wake of a 48-27 trouncing of Wake Forest, it's worth asking, where in the world has this been, at least against someone better than, say, Connecticut? The Tigers are in the midst of a down season most other programs would envy. They're 8-3 overall, with a meeting with South Carolina still to come. They finished 6-2 in the ACC, and could yet win the Atlantic Division if NC State loses one of its last 2 games and Wake Forest falls to Boston College next week. And chances are, given Clemson's relentlessly strong recruiting, this will be a one-year blip. Dabo Swinney's bunch has won 4 in a row since a loss at Pittsburgh, and it has reached 30 points in each of those victories, though getting to that figure against Florida State required a fumble return for a score on the game's final play. The Tigers are getting better. It may not be in time to do anything more than extend the program's streak of 10-win seasons to 11, but it doesn't bode well for the rest of the ACC. Notre Dame. The No-8 Fighting Irish, 10-1, can only do so much to help its cause at this point. And Saturday, Notre Dame pretty much maxed out, pummeling Georgia Tech 55-0 in its home finale. Brian Kelly's team scored on all 6 of its first half possessions and sneaked in Jack Kaiser's 43-yard interception return for a score for good measure. And while Georgia Tech 3-8 was abysmal in allowing 4 to 5 points before the break, Notre Dame deserves credit for its complete performance. The Irish still needs help to earn a playoff berth, and it will be difficult for Notre Dame to earn a semifinal slot over a Cincinnati team that won in South Bend gets into the barn at 13-0. Still, all the Irish can do now is drum Stanford next week and hope it is enough. Texas San Antonio. The Roadrunners' undefeated run survives another week thanks to a last-minute scoring drive. Frank Harris's 1-yard pass to Oscar Cardenas with 3 seconds remaining secured a 34-31 victory over UAB, not to mention a Conference USA West Division title. No 22 Utsa 11-0, 7-0 Conference USA isn't going to be a playoff team, nor will it end up in a New Year's 6 game, but there is much to be said for a team handling every challenge it faces. And the Roadrunners have done precisely that so far. Bryce Young, the Alabama quarterback, made a strong move in the Heisman race, throwing for 559 yards and 5 touchdowns in a 42-35 defeat of Arkansas. Young, who completed 31 of 40 passes, helped the Crimson Tide 10-1, 6-1 sec. Clinch the SEC West and lock up a showdown with undefeated Georgia for the conference title in 2 weeks in Atlanta. And while it wasn't a full-fledged rout, it still keeps No. 2 Alabama in the playoff hunt with 2 games to go. Pittsburgh. The Panthers 9-2, 6-1 AC are Coastal Division champions after a 48-38 defeat of Virginia. The star of the afternoon was Jordan Addison, who had 14 catches for 202 yards and 4 touchdowns, as the Panthers sealed a trip to Charlotte with a week to spare. That's 2 trips to the ACC title game in 4 years for Pittsburgh, which closes the regular season next weekend at Syracuse. Malik Cunningham. The Louisville quarterback was resplendent in a 62-22 blowout of Duke on Thursday, throwing for 303 yards and 5 touchdowns, while rushing for 224 yards and 2 scores. It was certainly one way for the Cardinals, 6-5, 4-4 AC, to clinch bowl eligibility. Cunningham became only the second player in FBS history with 300 passing yards and 200 rushing yards in a game.